Welcome to BAM, Badass Moms with Lori and Jenny. We are moms on a mission to share women's stories about life, fitness, aging, relationships, travel, and much more. Welcome to BAM with Lori and Jenny, and today we are doing a special episode of Jenny and I, and we thought it would be fun to chat about kind of the challenges of aging and just perspective and what we thought things were going to be like last year compared to where we are now. So we're just going to dive in. We're going to kind of go back and forth, keep it really casual, ask each other some questions, and just kind of roll with it today. So.
Yeah, sounds awesome. And I've, as you know, I've been looking forward to it. I think that it's fun for, like, when you and I have conversations, sometimes I'm like, I wish we had this recorded because we get into some funny stuff. But Lori and I both are having birthdays this month. I just had mine and I turned 50. So kind of one of those big ones where you like reflect and all that kind of stuff. And Lori's is this weekend.
That's right. So, and I'm not quite 50, but I'm running right behind. I'll be 43. So, but that was kind of our thought is like, hey, we're both, it's both of our birthday months. And, with every birthday, I think comes reflection. And we wanted to kind of just chat about what it means to us to kind of be turning another year older and kind of what we've been going through, what we've been thinking. And so, Jenny, I'm just going to start off. I'm going to ask you a general question. You roll with it. What does aging mean to you? And how has your perspective on it kind of evolved over, maybe not just the years, but over the past year?
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny because, when I was little, I remember seeing my grandma and she at this age looked like super old to me, and I think people looked older back then anyway. I mean, if you see the stuff, like we were joking last week, some friends and I were joking about the fact that like the Golden Girls were like in their 50s. They made them look like they were like 80.
Were they really? Oh my gosh, I don't even believe that. Like you thought they were like in their 80s, right? I mean, yes. I think that's a good time to just jump in and say like, the one thing over like the years, I think, that happens as you get older, you're like, people look younger and you're like, do I really look like I'm 40 or 50 years old? And you see these kids and then you start to refer to like all these like 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds as kids, right?
I know. It's crazy. I mean, I think one of the things that I love about getting older is I love spending time with different age groups. So like, obviously there's people my age, but then I love working with, as you said, kids, like people that are young in their career that are just getting started. It brings me a ton of energy and I love, sitting down with them and hearing what they have to say, and their perspective is so different. And even my kids, right? Like the stuff that they're interested in and the technology that they're used to, that they've grown up with. I mean, it's if you really sit down and have conversations with them, it's pretty interesting.
Right.
They're so fast now.
Well, right. And not that we're not motivated. Don't get me wrong. Right. Yeah. I feel like we're both very motivated people, but I feel like they're still fresh. They're ambitious. They're not tainted. They haven't been like, knocked down a bunch of times and which is good, I think we need that. And as we grow older, I feel like we learn resilience, right? Like,
for sure.
What does it feel like to fail and how do we, move on? And at that age, to be honest, they probably haven't failed that much yet, right?
No. And especially, I mean, I've also joked with my friends, like, have we coddled our kids too much? And I feel like we did let them make a lot of their own decisions and stuff like that. But we also, they haven't had a lot of adversity. I mean, COVID was a big deal, right? But they haven't experienced a lot of different things. And I think that right now they're both struggling and they're worried they're going to make the wrong decision and they're going to fail. And they're worried, like, even like, wanting to be done with school, and they only have 9 months left of not even 9 months left of their senior year of college and high school, and it's like as you get older you realize that's such a blip in the radar, like such a small amount of time, but they don't have that perspective, and they don't have the perspective that if they choose a major that quote unquote a wrong major, that
their life will still move on, right? They will still be able,
okay.
Right?
Fall off your bike, you get back on.
Right, and I think it's funny. It's a good example of how when you're younger, I feel like you want you want to rush things through. You want to get done with high school, or, you know, even earlier than that. You want to get your license. You want to graduate. You want to go to college. You want to be out in the working world. And I think a perspective on aging is you want time to slow down. You know, although there's things to look forward to, you're more appreciative of the moments, of the day to day. You don't want necessarily that next birthday to come so quick. You don't want, you know, to rush, because I feel like you've learned to take the time to enjoy. But when you're younger, there's this rush to grow up, right? And when you're finally grown up, there's this rush to be a kid again, and you can't go back, right?
I know. Well, and they both are, you know, and it's frustrating to watch because they both are trying to rush through. But I also remember I was exactly the same. So I don't know that, like, it's part of the deal, right? Mm-hmm. We went on the college campus tour with my youngest, and my friend and I mean, the stuff that these kids have now, like the dorm rooms are nicer, the cafeteria, like it's like a food court, but really good food. I mean, just insane. The gym is like, holy crap. Like, I pay a lot of money, and my gym it's a nice gym. It is not that nice.
It's like an all-inclusive resort for these kids with a little bit of education, right? Like,
totally. I know. So we were laughing because we're like, let's just switch place with the kids. Let's go back to college. And we would be those annoying people that would be like, I'm going to use every single amenity.
I know. I'm going to go to class, but I'm going to take advantage of the food and the recreation center. But back as a you know, college student, especially when we were in college, like, the amenities weren't that good, and you were kind of like, whatever, you know, they're there, I'll use them. But now it's kind of like, you know, it's that retirement kind of mentality of like, I want to utilize this leisure village.
I know.
So, you know, back to another question, I guess, you know, if you could share a personal experience or moment that made you realize the value of growing older and wiser, or even more like the moment you realized you were actually getting older.
Let's see. I mean, I think that there's little moments in your life, right? Like, you get that first real job, you buy a house, you have kids, like all of those are like kind of benchmarks. I think that one of the moments that I really realized that I was like getting older and could deal with my own stuff a little bit more was I used to ask my dad for advice on everything. And one time I asked him for advice, and he, like, it was basically a job that I was leaving, and I loved the job, but it was like a far commute, and I had 2 little kids, and I was talking to him, and it was a lateral move. Like, it wasn't a move up, but it was super close, and it was good, you know, career progression and all that kind of stuff, like in the long term. And I was telling him about it, and he's like, I feel like you're taking a step back in your career. And for the first time, I was like, actually, no. Like, I appreciate your perspective, but this is a lifestyle choice, and this is what works for me now. And it was like the first time that I was like, I appreciate that, but I'm going to do my own thing, you know?
Right. Like, I actually think I'm not that we haven't done it, you know, before, telling our parents are wrong, but in this, you know, like telling him maybe he was wrong and that you really do truly believe that you're making the right decision at that point in your life.
Yeah. And trusting myself enough to make that choice. And, you know, and knowing that, like, even if it didn't work out, I'd figure it out. Right.
Oh, totally. I mean,
that's kind of an important moment too.
I agree. I mean, for me, to be honest, it was really when I had my son that I was like, not that I hadn't had like moments in my life where I was like growing up, those same situations. You know, I had started a business, I had, you know, had a house, all that fun stuff. But for me, it really truly was like, I feel like hit me that I was getting older when I had my son, because it then puts in perspective how quickly they grow, and it really makes you realize how much you are growing, but you're also growing older, and you see it, you know, you see it in the mirror. You know, I think I hit 40, and my gray hair at first, I was like plucking 1 or 2 out, and now I'm like, I can't do that or I would be bald, right? Like, you know, it's those things that then you see it, you know, before you're like, oh yeah, maybe. And then you start to feel it a little bit, right? Yeah. Like, and that's a whole nother path we can talk about. You know, maybe we jump into that as, you know, aches and pains. You know, people joke about that. When you're younger, you laugh at the older people. You're like, and as you start to experience, you're like, no, this is legit, right? Like,
I know, like, you think they're just being whiny. I don't have anything better to do than complain. But, well, so this past year, you already know this because we've talked about it, but all of a sudden, all the stuff, I've been very active for years, right? And I've been in decent like physical condition. My diet's on point, like all that kind of stuff. But all the stuff that I've done for 20 some years all of a sudden isn't working anymore. And so like the scale is creeping up, and I'm not feeling the way that I am used to feeling, and my fitness level is different than I expect or than I
the intensity level is probably not the same, right? Like
yes, it's just yes, and recovery takes longer, and so the things that worked before aren't working anymore. And so finally, like I had to kind of reconcile with myself and say, you know what, I need to change something. Something's not working. I need to change something. And I still think like weight training is so critically important as you age. So cardio has all like I love weight training, but because I'm a runner, cardio has always taken a little bit more of a, it's been front and center. And now I'm like, I can't do that. Like I have to be more committed to the weight training. And it's not only so that I feel good and fit in my jeans and all that stuff, but I mean, I have osteopenia, right? So like protecting your bones and making sure that you have mobility to like get up from a seated position off the floor.
It's that functional movements, right? That as a,
Yep.
We go back to in our 20s where, yeah, we went to the gym because we wanted to feel good, but let's be honest, we went to the gym because we wanted to look really good, right?
Yeah.
We wanted to stand out. We wanted to be that particular weight. And I think, as we get older, I'm right there with you. All those, times at the gym that I did go higher intensity now, I feel like I'm paying for it now with my elbow, with my wrist, with my knee. And I'm just like you. It's like the things that used to work really well, I've now had to alter. And now it's more about like what's going to be a lifelong routine that's going to help me maintain. Yes, of course, we're all vain in the sense that we always want to look good, but more so we want to feel good and we want to be functional, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that was because I was fighting it so hard, I was like, nope, this has always worked. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to stick with it. And then I finally was like, you know what, if you're beating your head against a wall, like sometimes you got to shift. Right. And so I finally was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And it's a long process too, which is frustrating, right? Because I'm not patient. I think a lot of us, it's like, we want to see instant results. So I'm like, okay, I might have to wait like 3 months and see if this is like working at all. And if it's not, then I start something else and I have to wait another 3 months. So it might be like, I remember when I was pregnant, when they talk about like, oh, losing the baby weight, whatever. And it's like, well, it took you 9 months to gain the weight. Like give yourself 9 months to lose the weight. It's the same kind of thing. It didn't happen overnight. Like give yourself some grace.
Right. And it goes back to exactly what you said. If nothing changes, nothing changes. So if you're continuing to do the same thing and you don't put in a variety, then, you're not going to see those results. So we have to become, like we talked about, more resilient with aging and getting out of our own comfort zone and saying with our workouts, all right, well, we used to do this all the time and that was great. And I saw these results, but now maybe I need to get in the pool and do a little swimming. Maybe I need to get out of my comfort zone of what I think is, and being a trainer all my life, of course, there's a rhyme and reason to everything, but I'm a big fan of, be a little sporadic, throw random stuff in, because if you keep your body guessing, it's going to have to always, step it up and make changes, right? And if it gets, content, your body's not going to make those changes. It's going to settle into its comfort zone and say, hey, I've been doing this for 50 years. All right, I'm not going to make much change now.
Right, I'm just going to sit back and relax and hang out.
I know the drill, The
other thing, too, is like, there are certain things that I know I will get hurt more easily with now than, and I don't want to be sidelined, right? Like that is worse to me than anything else, like not being able to do things that I love to do. So I'm very protective and careful about like CrossFit. I know has worked for a lot of people, but that's something that I have chosen to stay away from because I worked in an orthopedic medical company. And I was like, I saw those doctors love CrossFit because so many people end up in their office. I mean,
let's be honest. Have you ever met I will raise my hand. I am not a huge fan of CrossFit, but with that said, there are a lot of people that love it. But have you ever met a person that does CrossFit that said that they've never had an injury from doing it, right? Like I've done CrossFit and I never hurt myself. And I'm like, I've never heard that. So,
I know. One thing that I think CrossFit does offer, and I want this to be I want other gyms and classes and stuff to feel this way. They have an insane community. Like,
Absolutely.
the community that they offer is amazing.
Yep, 100%. And I think that with, people that do participate in group fitness classes, or, have a community of whatever it may be, that you go to an art class, or, whoever you surround yourself with, at the end of the day, like, I think that's why people stick with certain things, is maybe they don't even know if at a point they like it anymore, but they love the community and the people that they surround themselves with. So 100% of, I agree with people engaging in things to really find their community. And with aging, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said that, in a remote world coming out of COVID and working more at home, finding a way to break back into the world and find the people that you want to hang out with. And that, I look at it as, like today is my like drop in women's hockey, I'm so stoked to go because for me, it's super fun to get on the ice, but it's so fun to just chat with those women once a week. Right. And they're not my best friends. I don't even talk to them except for when I'm at hockey, but they're so fun, like they're my people in that moment. And I think, that's so important with aging, is to find those outlets, of people that may not be your best friends, but are your acquaintances and that just empower you to keep going and doing.
My mom was, she got in the habit of working out in her basement, like during COVID, like she works out every day, exercises, she's 77. And so she's in good shape and all that kind of stuff. But she stopped seeing a lot of the friends that she would see during that time, obviously, like everybody did. And then she's working out in her basement. And so I see her circle getting smaller, and it worries me. And so I was talking to her about it, and I was like, go to the rec center. Just do one class a week.
Just get out, go meet some people, just have that social, or even, go to I don't even know, they have like coffee and whatever, just something to engage with others. So I watched a documentary, I don't remember the name of it, but it was like Secrets to Living to 100 or whatever it was. I think is on Netflix.
The Blue Zones?
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to talk about that too.
And what I loved about it, and these are all things we know, right? Obviously eating is a huge component of lifelong longevity, but also like all these people had hobbies, right? They all had something that kept them going, that they looked forward to doing, either like gardening or had a trade or whatever it was. I mean, it's just fascinating that, to me, it's always been like, if you keep your mind mentally stimulated and you keep your body moving and you surround yourself with good people and friends and family, and I think they point that out also, that's really the key, right? I mean, if there is a secret sauce, that's part of it, right? We all know that there's other random shit that really happens that, we have no control over. But if we did have any control, they've kind of narrowed it down to like, hey, this could be, the path to living a little bit longer.
Yeah, and the other thing that I thought was interesting in that documentary, they talked about like, they were trying to figure out why some of those places, the people were healthier. And I think they mentioned, is it elevation? Is it something like, but a lot of those places were hilly.
Oh, interesting. I do kind of recall that. Yeah.
Yeah, like it wasn't like massive mountains or anything like that, but these people had to go like uphill to get certain places. And I mean, just very basic things like that.
Well, and they were very functional. I mean, and it'll be interesting over the next 50 years as the younger generation ages, is we were already in a sedentary world, right? Yeah. But I feel like in a lot of respects, it's gotten worse, right? Yeah. And so it will be interesting because you look at all these communities that they were pointing out, that physical activity. And yes, people are going to the gym, but I still think people, we've lost sight of like like going for walks or gardening or, just doing normal stuff that isn't just in this box, show up, do your workout and be done. It's like, no, go out into the environment and, live and have that kind of movement. So it will be very interesting over the years to see how humans adapt, right?
I know. Yeah.
But so back to, specifically with aging and, last year compared to this year, now that you're 50, I mean, it's got to be weird to even hear 50, right? Like I joke because my husband's kind of right behind you on that. Yeah. And I always joke, like when he was turning 40, I'm like, you're turning 40. And like, oh shit, I turned 40. I was like, oh man, real deal. So I know it's coming, right?
Yeah.
But for you, last year when you turned 49, you're like, all right, I'm 49, next year I'm going to be 50. I always feel like it's kind of like that New Year's resolution. Like, what am I going to do? What am I accomplish? For you, what was it? And did that happen? And
Oh, it totally happened. It was like, there were a couple things. So my dad passed away, which and that was like a big, holy shit, like, we're not here forever. And he wasn't very old, he was in his mid 70s. And then I was turning 49, and I was like, well, there's stuff I want to do. And one of my biggest fears, and I think I've even said it on here before, but one of my biggest fears is not being able to fit everything in. And if I stay in the same place, I won't be able to fit everything in that I want to do. My husband is 55, so he's 5 years older than me. And so he always reaches that milestone first, which kind of like tests the waters for me a little bit. And he is one of the youngest people I know by far.
Totally. I agree. If you saw Jenny's husband, there is no way you would even imagine that he's over like 40. Yeah. I mean, he's definitely like, he's living his best life.
He's like Benjamin Button.
Yes.
Like, how do you not get any older? He's like getting younger.
Right.
So, yeah. So that kind of helps a little bit. And, I mean, I feel like the other thing too is like, I still feel like that totally immature kid, Oh,
I know, right? I mean, honestly, like I see my stepson and he's in high school, and I see these high school kids every now and then, and I'm like, do I really A, look that I'm in my 40s, and B, like, do I act like the old lady? Like, or I feel like I'm just like right there with them, right? And you have kids that are, kind of just a little bit older than that, and it's the weirdest feeling. It's just like, I don't feel any different,
Except having teenage kids. And like, this is one thing that's so bizarre. Like, having teenage kids and thinking like, oh my gosh, I remember when I went to my senior prom, or when I was graduating from college. Like, that is bizarre to me.
Totally. And realizing that your parents, like, so that's what like is a total like mind trip to me, is like your parents were then like how old we were, right? And knowing like, it's just like, they knew so much more than you thought they knew about what you were doing, right? And it's crazy.
Oh, I have to tell you, so I told you that when we went to Switzerland, so Sean and I took that trip to Germany, and then we went to Switzerland. And when I was 22, I went to the same place, and my mom was 50 at the time. And I begged her to stay in this hostel that I'd heard about, because I was like, nice. Oh, this place is supposed to be so cool. I told you the story, right?
I don't recall. No, I don't remember.
Okay, so I begged her to stay at this place it looked super fun. I don't even know how I'd heard about it. But anyway, so I was like telling Sean, hey, wouldn't it be fun if we stayed at the same place I stayed at with my mom, when I was 22 and she was 50. So a long time ago, right?
Right.
So anyway, we booked this place, and it's like pay in advance, and we booked 2 nights. By the way, hostels, like, they're not as cheap as you think they are. We did have a single room, and we had a sink in our room, but you still share like a toilet. Like, the toilet is like, it's got a full door and stuff.
Right.
It's like community, and a shower is community, and again, full door, so you're not like in a bunch of stalls or anything. But it was $167 a night. So we paid the 2 nights in advance. So the first night, we walk in, and it's bare bones, is what you expect. But the first night at like 3:00 in the morning, we just hear the drunk people like right outside our window, like coming back from the bars, some lady puking on the curb, whatever, and laughing and all this kind of stuff. Fine, whatever. But I was like, I woke up, and of course then couldn't get back to sleep, and I was like, I'm too fucking old for this.
That's exactly it. That's that sign of age right there. That's a moment. That's a defining moment of I am old. When all the when the drunk people now annoy you, and you are not one of them, right?
Totally. And I was like, first I was disappointed in myself, because I was like, well, come on, suck it up. And then I was like, I don't have to do this anymore. And so I told Sean, I'm like, you know what? I don't care that we paid in advance. Let's find a hotel. So we found this nice, swanky hotel and stayed there the next night.
Oh my gosh, I love it, right? Like, you point out, I see myself doing it all the time with these electric scooters and like these kids that are just like zooming up and down the street, and I'm like, that looks so fun, but oh my gosh, you're like, how annoying! You're not wearing a helmet. You're not paying attention. You're gonna break your arm, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then the next thing I look down, I'm pulling weeds out of my front yard. I'm like, I am officially old.
I know. At least you didn't yell, get off my lawn.
Right. It's those little, I think it's fun to talk about those moments where they gradually sneak up on you, where you're like, I'm never going to be that woman that like, yells at the kids that are too loud, or that, are just screaming at the pool. And the next thing you know, you're like, hey, you should quiet down, or you should walk. You're going to, stop flashing me. Oh my gosh. And then you look at the clock when you go to bed and it's like 9:30 and you're like, oh, this is amazing.
Oh yeah, totally. I start to panic if it hits like 10. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Right. And you think back to your younger years where you're like, we didn't even go out till midnight, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Like we had a Halloween party last weekend and it started at 8 and I'm like, whoo, I went out to take a nap.
Right. So
but
funny.
I will say we did close it down.
Oh, good. All right. So
I'm very proud of that.
There are those moments where, you know, you do power through and then the next day you're like, oh my gosh, why did I do that?
I know, exactly.
So, I want to talk about, so you had your big birthday and go back a year ago when you're 49 and you have your 49th birthday, and we always set these, like, I feel like goals, A, because they're fun, and B, because they give us something to kind of work towards. Did you have some of those going into having this big birthday, and what were they?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, there were some moments of like, holy crap, I've said before, I think here that one of my biggest fears is like not being able to fit in all the fun things I want to do. It's like, I want to try a bunch of different things. And when I was a kid, I remember my parents always teased me. The only thing I stuck with was soccer. Everything else, I was like, I would try it and then quit and do something else. But I love trying new things. And I love, I don't know. When I finish that cycle, I move along to something else that I'm like excited about. So anyway, when I was turning 49, I was like, okay, like there's shit I want to get done. And that's on my list of things to do that I haven't even started yet. Actually, a podcast was one of them. So that's awesome.
Sweet.
So I started that. And then I wanted to start my own business, and I did start my own business. So HR business. So that was awesome. So I felt like,
that's two big ones. That's two big ones.
Two really big ones. And then running the Berlin Marathon was on there for this year. And the bummer is I couldn't run it. I was able, I hurt myself like halfway through training. So I was able to like walk 10 miles of it, but I wasn't able, so I still got to experience it and all that stuff. But, I didn't get to finish the marathon, which that's fine. There's time.
But you showed up and you were there and you did what you could. And you didn't just say, I'm not going to go. You didn't, dismiss that just because you had an injury. You still did what you could. And I think that counts for sure.
But yeah, so it's like there's a bunch of stuff that I've wanted to do, and I've done a lot of it. I think that you kind of all of a sudden feel like you don't have as much time as you think you do.
Yeah.
So you start like, let's do this, and let's do this, and let's do this. So it's a mind shift though, because instead of having more time in front of you, you have more time behind you.
You do. I will be 43, right? And I still in my mind keep thinking I'm like 40. I don't know. I just keep going like, I don't know. Once you have that big birthday, you kind of hold on to it, and maybe you'll do it for 50 for a while. Just kind of, I'm still 50. I'm still 50. So, I think I haven't, and maybe I should, I have a couple days, I need to sit down and really figure out what my next steps are, or goals, or whatever you want to call it, for me to really, hammer down in the next year. I feel like this year for me specifically it's been challenging. I went through, losing, obviously I lost my studio a couple of years ago with COVID, and then kind of went through I don't know what I'm going to do, had an opportunity to work with a company for a bit, and then got laid off, around Christmas time, and kind of been ebb and flowing of, trying to figure out what's my next step. And it's been hard, and I think as you get older, you realize, yes, you fail and you can get through it, and you can find out, this could be the next best opportunity to find my new direction. But, I'll be honest, it's taking me a lot longer than I would have thought, after closing my studios, to really figure out what is my next step. And like you said, I feel like time is just, it's passing by, and do I have enough time to figure out what that next big thing is, or is that next big thing just, a bunch of small things? So, I don't have the answer, but I'm hoping that I can kind of at least narrow down some really kind of specific goals like you did, something to look forward to, and just keep rolling, and being open-minded, I think is kind of my biggest, goal in the next year, is just keep rolling, and something good will come up, but you have to take action to make action happen. So well, and I think too that the studio closed a couple of years ago, but a lot of that time we were still kind of like in COVID, where things weren't back to normal. So now things are pretty much back to normal. Totally.
And now you're probably feeling it even more, right? Like
Right.
that impact.
Totally. Yeah. It's like, I feel like I should be like, okay, there's no more excuses, if you want to call it that. Like, you know, and I have realized, and I think there was a quote I was kind of sharing, I think it was from Warren Buffett, and I thought it was so great. And it was basically like, in the world of business, and I kind of think in life too, is people are the most successful are those who are doing what they love. And I truly believe that, because if you're doing something you don't love, you're not going to be happy, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's so important. So if it takes 2 to 3 years to figure out what that is that you love again, or maybe it was what you loved so much before, I think it's worth that time of reflection.
Yeah, but I also think too, like, thinking about what you love, you did this recently, and it was like, yes, you love fitness, but you loved the community that the studio brought you.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about not just that one aspect, like it doesn't have to look the same, right? So if you love the community that it brought and the camaraderie, how do you build that in a different way if you can't build it in the same way?
Right. Well, and here we are with Badass Moms.
Exactly.
Right. So it is. It's thinking outside of the box where you're like, yeah, I had this business, and yeah, the business was just the exterior, but what was inside it that really empowered and sparked, you know, your desire to be your best and to help others be their best.
Well, because there's a ton of gyms and businesses and things like that, but very few that make you feel the way that people felt when they walked in the doors of yours.
Right.
You know, I mean, I don't like to drive very far. Like, I mean, I will, but it's, you know, I'm efficient, right? Like, I've got shit to do. So to go to a workout in Denver would not have been my thing. But I did, and I did it every week for, I don't even know how long. And then I taught there for a while, you know? So,
yeah, no, and it's stories like that you're like, wow, you know, it did mean something, not just to me, but to so many other people.
Oh, I heard the coolest thing yesterday. I was talking to my old boss. He was my first like HR boss when I went into corporate. So it was 20 plus years ago. And he was saying something. He's like, you know, at this phase of my career, he's like, all I care about is helping other people be better and accomplish what they want to accomplish. And he's like, and I had said something to him about just how much I appreciated his guidance when I was, you know, first starting out. And he's like, you know, thank you so much for saying that. He's like, you do a lot of wondering if you've ever made an impact on anybody or if you've ever like left a mark. And he's like, to know that he's like, I didn't think I was big on, you know, accolades and stuff like that. He's like, but to know that I made an impact, it just means so much. And thinking about like all those people that you impacted, you know, I think that that's huge.
Oh my gosh. So. Yeah. And I think for you, you know, I think about your experience in the corporate world. And, you know, I hate to say it, but I feel like there's tons of layoffs happening daily. I see it in the news, you know, and let's be honest, at companies, large companies, you're just a number. But if you can take it back to the impact you've had with the others that you worked with, right? Or them, you know, the friendships that you gained within those organizations, that's truly what matters. And yeah, did you help the company get their shit done? Sure. But at the end of the day, it was like, how many people did I impact by them knowing me? And how many people impacted me by me knowing them? You know, I think that is the true value of, you know, you go back to community, and I think that exists within the workplace. But at the end of the day, I mean, you are just a number, and it's such a sad thing to just be, you know, your job's gone, and it's kind of like, well, so what I was doing didn't matter, or you know. But I think we always have to keep in perspective, it mattered so much to all the people that you had interactions with.
Absolutely. Well, I saw something on LinkedIn this morning that said it was this woman who, I think she's fairly young in HR, and she said, here are my 7 rules of things that I will never do now that I've been in HR. And one of them was don't be friends with your colleagues. And I can't even say how much I disagree with that.
Wow. I agree with you.
I reaction to it. I was like, are you kidding me? Like,
don't be friends.
Some of my best friends, my business partner now I worked with, we are friends. My boss, my old boss, 2 of my old bosses, some of my best friends. Like, that to me is a sad existence.
Well, exactly. I mean, why would you don't be friends with the people you work with? I mean, those are the people that you're honestly spending probably more time with at some, you know, times than your family, right? Like you're engaged with them on a day-to-day, and to just kind of separate, don't be friends with them. I mean, that's a very interesting thought process, right?
Like, you're not having any fun at work. I'm just going to tell you right now.
Right. So as you've gotten older, I have a question. What do you think has like been the biggest mind shift? Like what has changed with your thought process of like what's next? Like when you were younger, you wanted to complete X, Y, and Z, and now, like you said, you do have a bucket list, but like what kind of mental mind shift has happened over the years?
I think I'm more flexible in my approach. Kind of going back to like, it doesn't have to be the studio, it can be the community.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I mean? Like, how do you find that in another way? I've had to be more flexible. I mean, I've always had like things in mind that I wanted to do, and especially like, I consider myself an athlete. I'm obviously not a professional athlete, but I'm athletic. I love physical activity. And, when you are an athlete and your sights are set on a race and you get hurt and you can't run, or you can't, I don't know, lift weights or whatever, you got to figure something else out. Right. So like, I remember, I was training for something, New York Marathon. It took me 3 times to get in. So perseverance is one.
Oh, I like that one.
Is one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I broke my foot. I had a stress fracture, and then I couldn't run. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to hop on the bike. That's when I got into spinning, and spinning has been a huge part of my life, and I wouldn't have met you. And so like, I don't know, this meandering road, I always was like taking the straight path. And then as you get older, you realize like things pop up, and you have to kind of like,
you have to be able to adapt, right? You have to be able to pivot. Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes it brings things that are more amazing than you could have imagined. I think that's a big one.
I think all of those. I mean, I agree with the acceptance of like, I don't want to say failure, but this year I had kind of the same thing happen for the last, I don't even know, 10, 11 years. I've always done this 100-mile bike ride called the Venus de Miles. So I love it. I highly recommend it. It's an all women's bike ride. It's super awesome and empowering. This was the first year, because of a knee injury, due to hockey. I had to have my come to Jesus moment, where I was on the fence of riding the 100 miles versus a 60. I hadn't been training as much, hadn't been on my bike. My knee had been, just not recovering as quickly as I wanted it to. And, it was a game time decision, honestly, like the night before. And I decided, you know what? Do I ride the 100 and be miserable and get through it? Yeah, I could have done it. Or do I do the 60, have fun with it, and crush it? And at the end of the day, when I was younger, I would have been like, no, fuck it. I'm going to do the 100. I don't care how much, I don't care how much pain I'm in. Like, I'm all in. And this year I was like, I want to be able to walk after the ride. I want to be able to have a drink and enjoy. And I did. I rode the 60 miles and same thing, like no regret. I had a blast. I rode with some phenomenal ladies, and, I look back at it and I'm like, I don't feel bad about it. Was this the first year I didn't ride the 100? Yeah. Does it kind of sting? Sure. But at the end of the day, like, I still had a fantastic time, and I was okay taking a different path.
I learned that not everything that happens is like the end of the world. And so watching my kids right now going through, like my oldest one in particular is really worried about what she's going to do after college. Like, what about this? And what about this? And what if I make the wrong choice? And it's like, you realize with perspective and time, like, you can't really fail at life. Like, you're going to figure it out. You'll just, if something's not working, you pivot, you go a different direction. I mean, we talked about too, my fitness journey this past year, everything that I've done for 20 plus years that has always worked is no longer working. So I finally had to get to the point where I'm like, okay, I have to shift what I'm doing.
Right. You have to switch it up, right? You have to, try new things. You have to take yourself out of your comfort zone. And, at the end of the day, like, it may be things you don't necessarily enjoy as much, but that you ultimately know that are probably better for your body as you're getting a little older.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah. And resistance training. I've always been a fan of resistance training. I've always loved it. I've always enjoyed it. And even more so, like you talk about, as we get older, I think it gets harder to convince yourself to do it, because it is hard, but it's actually one of the most important things you should do as you get older, along with stretching, flexibility, balance, core stability. But ultimately, you have to put resistance on your body, because our bone mass starts to deteriorate. There's so many things that happen to our body that we can't fight, but we can help, prolong as long as possible by adding that resistance training. And as we start to get older, things slow down just a little bit. You know?
Except your brain doesn't, which makes you super frustrated.
Super frustrated, right? Or when you have
your brain doesn't.
Right, or or it goes the other way where your brain does, unfortunately go, and then your body is fine, So there is that.
Wheels on the bus.
Totally. With now this monumental, quote unquote 50. What are you looking forward to in the years ahead? If you could sum it up.
I think, so one of my goals for this coming year is, I've always said, like, 0 fucks given, like, don't care what people say, like, that's aspirational for me. I mean, I don't want to be a jerk, obviously.
Right,
but
of course.
I don't want to feel like I have to edit myself to make other people comfortable, right? And I don't want to feel like I'm under a microscope, which is my own story. It's not like people are watching what I'm doing and saying like, oh my God, I can't believe she's doing that. It's my own story that I'm telling myself. But I want to get rid of that narrative. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to, because people say that as you get older, you just don't give a shit about that stuff.
Right.
And I still do a little bit more than I like, so I'm ready to kick that to the curb. I'm looking forward to, we're finally in a spot where, the kids will be in college and on their own. So we'll have some flexibility. Like, it's going to be a huge adjustment for them not being here. And I know it's going to be harder than I think it is. It will also be nice for us to not have to dictate our vacations and stuff around school breaks, right? Like, we'll be able to have a little bit more flexibility there, which will be nice. And then eventually, and I'm not saying I'm going to retire, because I don't know that I could just sit around. So I might do something different, but
you do remember Paula that we interviewed. She's been retired, but she works more now than she's ever worked.
Exactly. Like, I'm looking forward to doing things that I enjoy, and thank God, like, starting this new business, I really am enjoying it. So I'm looking forward to doing things that I enjoy instead of things that I have to do to pay the bills, right? So those are the big things.
I think that's awesome, and I agree. I mean, I'm truly looking forward to, finding, my next true love, whatever that may be, with my career. And, I go back and forth, day by day of what that might be, but I really am hoping some more clarity will come into my future of what, my next steps are. And, maybe my next steps are just being okay with where I am right now and truly enjoying that. But for me, it's continuing to get better with age, right? Like continuing to, enjoy every single moment. And for those of you who didn't listen to my little blurb on time the other day, I recommend you do a little daily bite I had about just how quickly it goes by and how important it is to just cherish every single moment. So I want to continue to remind myself of that. All right. Well, with that said, Jenny, I think today, it was a ton of fun.
Yes, I know. I mean, if only we could record all of our conversations.
Maybe we should just start doing that, right? And just compile them into one big podcast.
Right.
But yes, listeners, thanks for joining us today. And until next time, keep being you and keep being badass.